She thought dropping her daughter off at daycare was just part of the usual morning rush. Little did she know, the footage she'd watched later that night would shatter her expectations and leave her breathless with awe. Sarah had never anticipated that her seemingly ordinary day would end in breathless disbelief. But that was exactly what happened the moment she logged into the daycare surveillance system. She had dropped her 1-year-old daughter, Emma, off at the familiar, brightly colored building just as she did every morning. Rushing to work, she barely had time to think about what Emma's day might look like once she was out of sight. Yet later that evening, an unexpected email arrived from the daycare director, granting her access to the live feed and archived recordings. Curiosity led her to open the link, but she told herself it was just a quick peek. Maybe she'd watch Emma nap or see her toddle around with her little friends. As the footage loaded, Sarah felt a tingle of anticipation she couldn't quite explain. For some reason, the thought that she might uncover something unusual crept into her mind, though she didn't really believe it. After all, how eventful could a room full of toddlers be? Peering intently at her computer screen in the soft glow of her living room lamp, Sarah scanned the room in the video. At first, everything looked normal. She saw scattered toys, colorful foam mats, and a few children crawling or waddling unsteadily. A caregiver in a red t-shirt bent over one child, handing them a plush toy, while another adult tidied crayons at a nearby table. All of this was ordinary enough, yet Sarah felt her pulse quicken as she continued watching. She couldn't put her finger on why, but something about Emma's posture at the corner of the room held her attention. Her daughter was standing there, gripping the edge of a small plastic table, seemingly hesitant to move any closer to the other children. Emma looked at them, looked at the caregivers, and then cast a fleeting glance at the camera's direction, though of course she couldn't see her mother on the other side of the screen. For a moment, Sarah wondered if Emma was simply feeling shy or tired. Then, one of the daycare workers turned in Emma's direction. The woman's eyes lit up, her body language shifted, and she signaled Emma with gentle hand gestures, as if encouraging her to approach. Sarah could feel a knot tighten in her chest. She remembered all the times Emma had tried to take a step at home, only to wobble and decide that crawling was safer. Now, through this grainy yet revealing footage, Sarah sensed something monumental about to happen. The caregiver crouched slightly, still coaxing Emma forward, while her daughter appeared torn between excitement and uncertainty. Emma's tiny hand hovered above the table's surface, no longer gripping it for dear life, and Sarah's heart thudded in her ears. She leaned closer to the screen, eyes fixed on her daughter's every move, barely daring to blink. In that instant, Sarah realized she was witnessing a scene that might change everything she believed about motherhood, milestones, and the way unforeseen moments can reshape our most cherished memories. Then Emma released the table altogether, and Sarah's world stood still as she drew in a sharp breath, bracing herself for whatever came next. Sarah's typical day began long before the sun fully illuminated the sky. As a single mother, she often found herself juggling a delicate balance between the demands of her job and the emotional weight of caring for Emma on her own. She would wake up in the early hours, already feeling a pang of guilt in the pit of her stomach, worried that she could never give Emma all the time and energy she deserved. That pang would tighten whenever she remembered how, just a few months earlier, she had vowed never to leave her daughter in someone else's hands if she could help it. But life had a way of dictating its own terms, and her job at a marketing firm had recently become more demanding, requiring her to clock in earlier than before. Financially, she couldn't afford to lose momentum in her career. Emma's future depended on her stability. Still, the choice to drop Emma off at daycare before most children even arrived weighed heavily on Sarah's conscience every single morning. As she drove to work on dimly lit roads, she would replay a familiar mental checklist. Did she pack Emma's favorite blanket? Had she remembered the spare set of clothes in case of spills or accidents? Each question was a small but significant part of ensuring her daughter's day went smoothly. Yet it was the intangible worries that gnawed at her the most. Would Emma be comforted if she fell down while trying to walk? Would the caregivers notice the way Emma sometimes got overwhelmed by loud noises? Would anyone hold her if she cried for more than a minute or two? These questions, layered with guilt and apprehension, made Sarah's morning commute feel like an eternity. Once she clocked in at work, her tasks would take over, offering a fleeting distraction. Still, there were moments, like when a co-worker asked about weekend plans or someone mentioned their own child's milestones, when Sarah's heart would clench and her thoughts would drift back to Emma, hoping she was thriving despite her mother's absence. Emma had been attempting to stand on her own ever since she turned 9 months old, always stretching those little legs and then tumbling on her padded knees. She never seemed too upset by her stumbles. If anything, Emma appeared determined to try again. Each attempt ended in a soft thud, sometimes followed by a tiny yelp of surprise, but rarely tears. Sarah always made a point to crouch down and cheer her on, hugging her gently to convey a sense of security. Even so, Sarah couldn't shake the nagging fear that she wasn't around enough to help Emma gain the confidence she needed to finally take those first solo steps. At home, weekends were a blur of catch-up chores, grocery runs, and errands, leaving only stolen moments of playtime. In the back of her mind, she feared that Emma might feel the absence of her mother's undivided attention. It was a worry that settled in her chest like a small, persistent weight, pressing down on her every time she saw other parents with more flexible schedules. This internal struggle intensified whenever Sarah found herself at the daycare, observing Emma from a distance as Ms. Rachel, one of the caregivers, interacted with her. Ms. Rachel was a beacon of warmth and patience, traits that naturally drew the children toward her. She had a way of dropping to one knee, looking each child in the eye, and speaking in soft, animated tones that made them feel heard and important. Emma, shy as she was, always seemed to light up whenever Ms. Rachel approached. There was a gentleness to Ms. Rachel's method of guiding Emma around the colorful play area, gently placing a hand behind her back, or providing a soft word of encouragement if Emma hesitated. Nonetheless, Sarah couldn't fully relinquish her unease. She appreciated Ms. Rachel's kindness, but her own anxieties wouldn't let her trust anyone wholeheartedly with Emma's care. She knew that no matter how wonderful the daycare staff was, no one could replace a mother's unwavering attention. On more than one occasion, Sarah had hovered a little too long at drop-off, lurking by the doorway and watching Emma. She told herself she was just being a concerned parent, but a part of her recognized the lingering guilt that fueled her vigilance. Each time Ms. Rachel caught Sarah's eye, she offered a reassuring smile and a quick thumbs up, as if silently communicating, "Don't worry, we'll be fine." It was the kind of reassurance Sarah desperately needed, though she wasn't ready to fully admit it. While driving away, she would replay the image of Ms. Rachel encouraging Emma, gently supporting her wobbling stance, and see her daughter's tentative smile. A pang of hope always mingled with her guilt, leaving her torn between relief that Emma was in nurturing hands and regret that those hands weren't her own. Yet despite these lingering uncertainties, Sarah couldn't deny that Emma seemed to be in good spirits more often than not. The real worry, tucked away in the darkest corner of her mind, was that Emma might hit some important milestone, like her very first steps, when Sarah wasn't there, and that moment would belong to someone else. She had assured herself that if it ever happened, she would find a way to celebrate it regardless. Still, she couldn't help but pray that when the time came for Emma to walk, she would be there in person, arms wide open, ready to catch her little girl. All around the daycare room, soft midday light filtered through colorful curtains, illuminating a scene that appeared perfectly ordinary at first glance. The camera feed showed children scattered across foam mats, some crawling or toddling on shaky legs, while others stacked bright plastic blocks into lopsided towers. A couple of caregivers moved back and forth, tidying markers and crayons that had rolled under tiny desks, their chatter muffled by the low hum of fans. Posters of the alphabet and whimsical animal illustrations covered the walls, the gentle swirl of overhead mobiles adding to the serene, almost hypnotic atmosphere. Despite the bustling activity, a sense of routine pervaded. It was just another day at the daycare, where laughter occasionally broke out in soft peals, and the biggest dramas involved who got to play with which stuffed animal next. Yet, in a far corner, away from the vibrant chaos, Emma stood near a small table, her small hand clasping the edge with a grip that bordered on desperation. She was alone, not quite invisible, but undeniably separate from the little pockets of play happening around the room. The surveillance camera was angled in such a way that Emma's face remained partially obscured. Still, there was no mistaking her posture, rigid, hesitant, almost as if she were carefully calculating the distance between herself and every other object in the room. One of the other toddlers stumbled near her, releasing a high-pitched giggle, but Emma didn't laugh along or reach out to join them. Instead, she seemed to tighten her grip on the table's edge, her eyes flicking back and forth in a nervous rhythm. The truth was, Emma had never been the most outgoing child, but in that moment, she appeared especially withdrawn. Days, or even weeks ago, she might have at least crawled toward the circle of children who were happily banging toy drums. This afternoon, however, she remained still, almost transfixed, as if sensing that something important was about to happen, even if she couldn't quite identify what that might be. Then, with a subtle shift in the camera's perspective, Ms. Rachel came into view. She wore the same red shirt Sarah had noticed in previous clips, the bright color contrasting sharply with her calm demeanor. Even from this faintly pixelated footage, it was evident that Ms. Rachel possessed a certain warmth, an aura that drew children toward her, that made them believe in her kindness before she even spoke. She was crouched down at first, tying the shoelaces of another little girl, but all at once her posture changed. She stood up slowly, scanning the room until her eyes fell upon Emma, who was still hovering beside that table, glancing around like a watchful, wary observer. Ms. Rachel paused, studying Emma with a gentle curiosity. Then, she began to approach, her steps deliberate and unhurried, as if she didn't want to startle the child. A palpable tension seemed to seize the air the moment Ms. Rachel reached Emma's side. The caregiver lowered herself to Emma's eye level, knees bent, and one hand resting lightly on the edge of the table. If a passerby were to walk into the room right then, they might not have noticed anything amiss, but for Emma, this was a pivotal encounter. Even the camera angle, distant and detached, couldn't disguise the intent in Ms. Rachel's eyes as she inched closer, expression calm yet encouraging. Without uttering a word, or at least none that the silent footage could convey, Ms. Rachel extended her hands in front of her, palms facing Emma. It was a simple, universal gesture. "Come here, I've got you." Emma blinked, chewing on her lower lip in that hesitant way she often did when she wasn't sure whether to trust the situation. Her tiny fists slowly unclenched from the table, but she didn't move forward. Instead, she glanced over her shoulder, as though searching for a reassuring face among the sea of toddlers who were now beginning to notice Ms. Rachel's interaction with her. A few of Emma's classmates started to gather, curious about what might be happening. One child, slightly older, clapped their hands in excitement, as if sensing a show was about to start. Another, still new to walking themselves, wobbled over and plopped down onto the mat near Emma. The hushed energy in the room shifted focus entirely to this small girl, standing with one hand barely grazing the table and the other hovering near her side. Even the camera feed seemed sharper somehow, zeroing in on the delicate interplay of fear and determination in Emma's stance. The rest of the daycare no longer existed. No more crayons rolling under desks, no more squeals over stuffed animals. And it felt as though the children, Ms. Rachel, and even the very air around them were collectively holding their breath, waiting to see what would unfold. Emma's face was partially shielded by a lock of brown hair that had come loose from her tiny ponytail, but one could discern the flicker of conflict in her eyes. She wanted to move, but something held her back, a whisper of uncertainty tugging at her every attempt to step away from that safe, stable table. Within that suspended moment, Emma's fragile mindset spoke volumes. Could she really do this without her mother by her side? Ever since she'd been old enough to cling to Sarah's pant leg, Emma had sought her mother's presence in moments of discomfort, rarely venturing beyond a few feet if she didn't feel Sarah was nearby. Now, confronted with the soft beckoning from Ms. Rachel, with a gathering audience of wide-eyed toddlers, she didn't have Sarah's comforting embrace to fall into. In her short life, Emma had become accustomed to hearing her mother's voice whenever she tried something new. The absence of that familiar, reassuring tone made the distance between the table and Ms. Rachel feel like a chasm. Yet there Ms. Rachel stood, patient and unwavering, her outstretched hands a silent promise of safety. A near-electric buzz filled the space, generated by the anticipation of what Emma might do next. Emma inhaled, a small shaky breath that lifted her shoulders ever so slightly. Her eyes darted back to Ms. Rachel's face, searching for signs of confidence, maybe even silently willing the caregiver to somehow convey that this was okay, that she wouldn't fall, or if she did, she wouldn't be alone. For a split second, it looked as though Emma might let go entirely, as though her little body would finally commit to that forward motion she'd always been too afraid to complete. But at the last moment, she hesitated, her knuckles tightening against the plastic edge of the table once more. Anyone watching might have felt an uneasy twinge of empathy, recalling the anxiety of a child stepping outside their comfort zone for the first time. Ms. Rachel, however, didn't drop her gaze or retract her hands. She merely inched a tiny bit closer, bridging the gap by a few inches, still keeping her palms open and inviting. It was as if she were telling Emma, wordlessly, that she believed in her completely, no matter how long it might take for her to take that leap of faith. At that precise juncture, one of the toddlers behind Ms. Rachel clapped again, louder this time. A ripple of excitement spread, prompting Emma to briefly glance at the group forming a semicircle behind Ms. Rachel. Some were grinning, others staring with open curiosity. The air felt thicker, as though every molecule in that small daycare room was charged with adrenaline. Emma inhaled once more, her lips forming a determined line. For an instant, she whispered something, her mouth moving in what could have been the barest trace of words, though the camera's vantage point offered no audio to confirm it. Perhaps she was reminding herself that she had tried walking before, that she had wanted this for so long. Perhaps she was thinking of her mother, picturing Sarah's proud smile when Emma would finally find the courage to stand on her own 2 feet without trembling. Or maybe she wasn't thinking at all. Maybe she just felt, deep in her tiny bones, that this was a moment of no return. Whatever coursed through her mind in that flash of resolve, it propelled her forward. Her hand began to loosen its grip on the table, and her body seemed to shift, the smallest tilt suggesting movement. It was at this thrilling juncture that the camera recording revealed the barest flicker of something in Emma's expression, a blend of bravery and uncertainty, a glimmer that suggested she was on the verge of rewriting her story forever. No longer rooted to the spot by fear, she was gathering her nerve, well aware that in a matter of seconds, everything about how she navigated the world might change. No one else in the daycare room, child or adult, seemed to dare make a sound. They watched Emma with bated breath, their collective anticipation almost tangible in the stillness. Emma's gaze locked onto Ms. Rachel's face, a face brimming with tender encouragement, and for one heart-stopping moment, the distance between them felt insurmountable. Then, all at once, Emma's fingers slipped free of the table, and a hush fell over every tiny onlooker, each of them poised on the cusp of an unfolding miracle. Emma's tiny fingers loosened their grip on the table, and for a heartbeat that seemed to defy time, she stood there with her legs quivering beneath her. No one breathed. Even the faint hum of the overhead lights felt muted against the single moment that united every gaze in the room. Toddlers, caregivers, and the silent camera perched in the corner. Emma's eyes flicked to Ms. Rachel, who knelt mere steps away, hands outstretched in encouragement. The caretaker's face glowed with anticipation, her mouth slightly open, as though she were about to speak but couldn't find the words. In that fleeting second, Emma swayed to one side, wobbled, and for an instant, it looked as though she might drop to her knees in defeat. Yet something in her expression shifted. Determination smoothed out the worry lines on her small forehead. She placed one foot forward, the motion trembling with equal parts fear and resolve. Then another, and another, bridging the gap between herself and Ms. Rachel in unsteady, miraculous strides. A hush clung to the air like fog. Everyone present seemed caught between disbelief and hope, as if afraid that the slightest sound might break the spell. But once Emma managed those first 3 or 4 steps, Ms. Rachel inhaled sharply, her arms rising in celebration. A bright, almost incredulous smile lit her face, and she began clapping, tentatively at first, then with unrestrained excitement. That small sound, the crisp echo of palms colliding, unleashed a wave of cheers that rippled through the daycare. Two children who had been drawing on a nearby table dropped their crayons, stood up, and toddled closer to watch. Another child, still learning to string words together, let out a squeal of delight that prompted a chain reaction among the onlookers. Within seconds, the hum of excitement filled every corner of the room, as if Emma's achievement had infused everyone with a collective burst of happiness. Ms. Rachel, who had been crouching, rose to her feet the moment she was certain Emma was moving toward her with intent. She cupped her hands near Emma's shoulders, not touching but hovering there protectively in case the little girl lost her balance. The tension in her eyes gave way to sheer exuberance. "Come on, sweet girl," she seemed to mouth, her lips forming words that the silent camera couldn't relay. Even though there was no audio, it was easy to imagine the warmth and encouragement in her voice. Emma, legs shaking with each step, focused on Ms. Rachel's glowing face as though it were the only thing in the room. Step by step, she inched closer, her cheeks flushing with the thrill of this new sensation. She was walking, truly walking, for the first time, propelled by a mixture of hope, excitement, and the gentle encouragement radiating from everyone around her. When Emma was just a pace away, her wobbly legs finally gave out. She tumbled forward, directly into Ms. Rachel's waiting arms. Rather than crying out in fear or disappointment, Emma giggled, a soft, breathy sound that seemed to echo in the hearts of everyone who witnessed it. Ms. Rachel immediately pulled her in close, wrapping the little girl in an embrace that felt like a celebratory dance. The caregiver rocked back and forth, her face alight with sheer joy, and even though she tried to contain her emotions, tears shimmered on her lashes. One toddler, standing nearby, blinked in confusion at Ms. Rachel's tearful smile, then started clapping in earnest, as if to say, "Yes, this is exactly what we do when something incredible happens." That child's applause spurred the others to join in. Soon the entire class erupted into a symphony of tiny hands clapping. Some children simply patted their own legs or squealed with delight, unsure of how to fully participate, but sensing the momentousness of what they had just witnessed. A few took unsteady steps forward themselves, emboldened by Emma's breakthrough, as if her courage had somehow spread to them. Ms. Rachel laughed through her tears, continuing to sway with Emma in her arms, her red shirt now the brightest spot in the room, a beacon of warmth and triumph. It was one of those rare, perfect instances where every worry and fear seemed to dissolve, replaced by a collective appreciation for the magic of a child's first steps. No one in the room noticed the camera, but it captured every second in clear detail. The quiver in Emma's legs, the radiant joy on Ms. Rachel's face, the wide-eyed amazement of the other children. In that frozen slice of time, the daycare transformed into a place of pure enchantment, a tiny universe where extraordinary milestones occurred in the most ordinary of settings. And while Emma had no idea how her actions would ripple beyond these walls, Ms. Rachel seemed keenly aware of how special this was. She leaned her cheek gently against Emma's head, whispering soft praises, comforting the little girl who had just conquered one of life's earliest challenges. It wasn't just about walking. It was about trust, bravery, and the realization that even in her mother's absence, Emma could find safety and encouragement in another's arms. Far away from the daycare, on the other side of a computer screen, Sarah watched everything unfold with her hand pressed so tightly against her mouth that her knuckles whitened. When Emma released the table, Sarah's heart hammered so hard she thought she might faint. She recognized every expression that flitted across her daughter's face. The brief flash of fear, the stubborn resolve, the flicker of wonder. It was as if she were physically there, crouching behind Emma, sending every bit of her energy into those shaky steps. When the moment of triumph arrived, when Emma fell into Ms. Rachel's arms and giggled with a joy Sarah had never seen before, an involuntary sob escaped Sarah's throat. She wanted to be there, wanted to scoop Emma into her own arms, laugh with her, and assure her that this was only the beginning of many amazing things she would do. But even as that sense of absence threatened to unravel her, it was overshadowed by a bigger, more overwhelming emotion: pride, massive, uncontainable pride in what Emma had just accomplished. On the live stream, Ms. Rachel eased Emma back onto her feet, still holding her hands, allowing her to stand and bask in the cheers of her daycare companions. Children hopped around excitedly, clapping and babbling with big, goofy grins on their tiny faces. The caregiver mouthed words that were probably some variation of "great job" or "I'm so proud of you," and gently rubbed Emma's back. Emma's expression was a marvel, eyes sparkling with a newfound confidence, her face flushed with joy. For a moment, it appeared she might try walking again right then and there, but instead she nestled against Ms. Rachel, as if gathering her strength for the next big step whenever it might come. At home, Sarah had tears streaming down her cheeks. She felt an odd mixture of loss and jubilation. She wished she could have been physically there for Emma's first steps, but seeing her daughter wrapped in the warmth and excitement of that room, surrounded by tiny friends and a caregiver who genuinely cared, Sarah realized that Emma was not alone. She might have taken those steps without her mother present, but she hadn't taken them without love and support. That realization, painful yet comforting, spurred a fresh wave of tears. She laughed through her sobs, pressing one trembling hand against her chest to steady her racing heart. The sense of relief that coursed through her was almost overwhelming. Emma was okay, more than okay. She was flourishing. Finally, as the daycare scene shifted to other children returning to their play, Ms. Rachel walked out of frame with Emma resting on her hip, both of them looking thoroughly content. For a few seconds, all that remained on the screen was a swirl of colorful activity, the buzz of daily routines resuming. But Sarah couldn't move. She stayed there, hands still against her mouth, tears still slipping down her cheeks, heart still pounding with an intensity she'd seldom felt. A surge of gratitude rushed through her. Gratitude for Ms. Rachel's compassion, for Emma's resilient spirit, and for this unbelievable era of technology that allowed her to witness the moment live. She could almost feel Emma's tiny arms wrapped around her own neck, hear that cheerful little giggle in her ear. In that instant, every sleepless night, every pang of guilt, every worry that had weighed on her mind dissolved into the background, replaced by an overwhelming certainty. Her daughter was growing into a brave, spirited soul, fully capable of blooming even when Sarah wasn't physically there to watch. Exhaling a shaky breath, she let her tears fall freely, no longer embarrassed or ashamed of how deeply she felt this moment. It wasn't the way she had always envisioned Emma's first steps. She had hoped to be right there, arms outstretched, encouraging Emma in person. Yet the reality played out in a form she could never have orchestrated, and surprisingly, it was beautiful in its own right. As she reached for her phone to replay the footage, a gentle smile broke through her tears, and she whispered to the empty room, "You did it, baby. You really did it." Though Emma couldn't hear her, Sarah believed that, in some way, her daughter already knew. Sarah, eyes still misty with tears, couldn't shake off the sense that she had just witnessed something too beautiful to keep to herself. She spent a few more minutes replaying the footage on her laptop, studying every frame of Emma's triumphant steps, every flicker of emotion on Ms. Rachel's face, every wide-eyed clap of the children who had gathered to watch. There was an unspoken magic in that daycare room, a warmth and sense of togetherness that transcended walls and distance. With her heart still pounding from the aftermath of this stunning revelation, Sarah made a choice that would ripple far beyond her living room. She logged on her social media account, uploaded the short video clip, and typed a brief caption explaining how she felt as she watched her daughter's first steps from miles away. In a moment of both pride and vulnerability, she hit post, never imagining how this single act would resonate with so many. It started with just a few reactions. Friends and close family showered her with comments full of hearts and congratulations. Yet, as night turned to dawn, the views skyrocketed. Notifications flooded her phone, so incessant that she had to mute it just to get a few hours of sleep. By the time she woke up, the post had been shared thousands of times, picking up comments from parents scattered all around the globe. Some wrote tearful testimonies about remembering their own children's first steps, how they, too, had felt a bittersweet mixture of pride and heartbreak if they missed that crucial moment. Others shared personal videos, turning Sarah's page into a tapestry of first-step triumphs, small, wobbly miracles that echoed Emma's. Among the well-wishers were single mothers like Sarah, who expressed gratitude for seeing someone else voice the complexities of balancing work and motherhood. The daycare footage became a kind of universal window into the vulnerability and wonder that accompanies every milestone in a child's life, especially when it unfolds beyond a parent's immediate reach. What surprised Sarah most were the reactions from educators and caregivers. She spotted a comment from a preschool teacher in another country, describing how she often recorded short clips of her students' milestones and sent them to parents who couldn't be physically present. "Moments like these," the teacher wrote, "are exactly why I love my job. It's not just about teaching letters and numbers. It's about nurturing tiny humans as they discover their place in the world." Another comment came from a retired daycare director who recalled the countless first steps she had witnessed in her decades-long career, many of which the parents missed because life's demands can be relentless. "Don't feel guilty," she reassured Sarah. "Your little one knew love was there, even if you couldn't be." The best caregivers extend a mother's arms when she can't be present. The outpouring of empathy and personal anecdotes transformed the video from a simple recording of Emma's first steps into a communal reflection on trust, love, and the ways in which caregivers can become cherished figures in a child's universe. In the midst of this digital whirlwind, Ms. Rachel's role took center stage. People were profoundly touched by her gentle patience and genuine excitement, especially when they saw her tears glistening in the camera footage. Comment after comment praised her compassion, calling her an angel on earth or the best kind of teacher. The daycare's official page soon chimed in, posting a heartfelt acknowledgement of Ms. Rachel's work. "We're incredibly proud to have Ms. Rachel on our team. She treats every child as if they were her own, and that's exactly the kind of love our children deserve." This sentiment was echoed by dozens of parents who had children enrolled in the same facility. They shared anecdotes of Ms. Rachel staying late to comfort a fussy toddler or using her own break time to teach a shy child a new skill. One mother wrote, "My daughter would run into Ms. Rachel's arms every morning before she'd even remember to say goodbye to me." Another mother simply referred to her as guardian angel, a moniker that quickly caught on until it became almost synonymous with her name. Sarah, meanwhile, felt a mixture of awe and humbleness as the spotlight widened. Friends tagged her in posts from local parenting groups discussing the video, drawing parallels between Emma's story and broader themes of community support. International news sites began to pick up the story, playing short snippets of Emma's first steps and praising Ms. Rachel's maternal instinct. More than anything, Sarah marveled at how easily a personal snippet of her life had become a universal tale of hope and humanity. She realized that while she had posted the video to share her joy and longing, it had tapped into a far deeper well of communal experience. It was about how every parent wants to be there for their child's big firsts, yet life inevitably pulls us in different directions. It was about caregivers who step in, not as replacements, but as allies, ensuring that children experience encouragement and love even when their parents can't always be physically present. That understanding formed the core of what the video represented. Sometimes, the greatest milestones in our children's lives don't happen under our watchful eyes. The real miracle is when they're surrounded by others who will cheer just as passionately, who will protect them with the same tenderness. Emma had found an extension of her mother's love in Ms. Rachel's arms, and that revelation reminded Sarah and countless others of a universal truth. There will always be people who nurture your child's spirit without needing the label of parent or relative. They do it because they recognize the sacredness of a child's trust and the fragile wonder of watching a tiny human take an uncertain step toward independence. As the video continued to circle across platforms, it inspired countless discussions on the importance of early childhood educators, the guilt that working parents often shoulder, and the remarkable resilience children display when properly supported. Sarah found herself reflecting on the words that kept popping up in her notifications: love, support, community, gratitude. Over and over, people came back to these core concepts, layering new stories of triumph and tears. Each time, Sarah felt less alone, more understood, and more hopeful about Emma's future. She realized that while she might not always be able to physically catch Emma, she could trust that caring hearts were willing to do so on her behalf. And when Emma was older, she could watch this video and know how cherished she was from the very beginning. Finally, as the initial surge of online attention began to settle into a steady hum of supportive messages, Sarah paused to think about the profound message she wanted to share. She added a small update to her post, writing, "Sometimes the biggest moments in your child's life don't happen in your arms, but in the arms of someone who loves them just as fiercely. I am so grateful that Emma has found kindness and comfort in others. May she always know she is surrounded by people who believe in her." How about you? Do you remember the first time your child took a brave step forward, whether you were there to witness it or not? In that final line, she offered an invitation for readers to dive into their own memories and reflections. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds more comments poured in, stories of kids walking, talking, laughing for the first time while parents stood witness or heard about it secondhand. Each tale served as a reminder that love, above all else, is what sustains those milestones. It doesn't have to come from just one person or even from a parent at all. Often, the world is brimming with those who step in and offer their hearts when we least expect it.